Hey friends, it is 1 p.m. on Thursday afternoon, so you know what that means. We are live here from the Birmingham Museum. I am Caitlin. I am not dead. I know I haven't been in the last couple of videos, but I am like one of our creepy dolls in our collection. I will pop up when you least expect it, and you cannot get rid of me. So first things first, this will be our last live of the year for two reasons. The first being is that we have so many new videos coming out in the next month and a half, and we need time to film and edit all of those. Our first one is actually coming out next Monday. We did a genealogical interview with the city clerk, Alex Bingham, and that is super fascinating. She's related to so many notable figures in Birmingham history and also on the world stage as well. So be on the lookout for that. And our second one is actually going to be a series of videos on holiday traditions here in Birmingham. So we'll have videos on cookies, Victorian ghost stories, which you know I love, Christmas cards, tree decorating, and crafts. So stay tuned for those. Those will be a heck of a lot of fun, and that's going to be starting December 1st. And our second reason is we will be spending slightly less time at the museum from now till the end of the year. As you may have seen or heard, Birmingham has started its COVID-19 hotline up again, and all museum staff are taking turns manning that. So I'm going to give the number for the hotline real quick. If you or someone you know needs some assistance or information on resources at this time, you can either call this number or ask us in the comments. Dawn is the camera person today, and she was at the hotline yesterday, so she knows everything. But if you want it, the number for the COVID-19 hotline for Birmingham is 248-530-1805. And that is open regular business hours and Monday through Friday, excluding holidays. So to get down to our live today, I was going through some boxes in my office, and I came across some things on the very early school district here in Birmingham. So we have done videos in the past about the school district and its rise, and we also have a virtual exhibit on our website that I'll link down below on both the early history of the school district and also the modern history of the schools. But what I like most about these things is kind of like sometimes these little laws or like these weird little things that kind of give you a really good sense of the character of the times and everything. And so we had a couple books in our collection that really illustrate that. And the first I'm going to show you is called The General School Laws of Michigan with Appendixes, compiled at the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction in 1889. And so this, as you might expect, is full of legalese and just really kind of silly things like who can vote on what, who is going to appoint whom, what does a treasurer do, those sorts of things. But we find some really interesting things in this. So just for reference, Michigan becomes a state in 1840. So this is only a couple decades away from that. This is 2 decades from the founding of Hill School, which was Birmingham's first K through 12 public institution in 1869. And at this point, Hill School is the only school in the Birmingham School District. So these laws call for schools to be open at least 3 months of the year, because Michigan at this time is still mostly a rural society, and so kids have to help out on the farms, and sometimes 3 months where all families could spare kids at this time. So far cry from today, where we have like these rules that state, you know, you have to be in school at least, I don't know, a couple hundred days out of the year. I think it's something like 120. I don't know, it's been a while since I graduated. I didn't pay that much attention to school anyways. And it also called for each township to have its own library, and they included this as part of their educational system. So Martha Baldwin would have loved that law. It also reinforced that textbooks were to be free. Districts could not charge students for their textbooks or to rent them as well. So kind of emphasizing that point that education was supposed to be open to everyone, no matter what your socioeconomic status. And let me see. Oh, and it also standardized teachers' educations by enforcing that they were to go to and get education post-high school, either a 2 or a 4-year degree. And so at this time you kind of see many professions professionalizing. Although certain parts of the country you could still get away with, hanging up a sign saying you were a doctor and then just performing surgeries on people. The late 1800s were an excellent time for grifters. So just keep that in mind if you ever get access to a time machine. Late 1800s. Anyone could operate. One of the most interesting things I've found is today some extra funding for education comes from things like the Michigan State Lottery. But in the late 1800s, there was no Michigan State Lottery. So one of the ways that schools could get extra funding was through various other fees and fines that the township could levy. And one of the more interesting ones is, according to, there was an Act number 108 of the Public Acts of 1877, which was amended by the Public Acts of 1881, and it levied a fee of $1 per male dog per year, and $3 for every female dog you owned per year. And these were put into a giant pot at the township, and it was used for restitution for, say, if a farmer had sheep mauled by a dog. They could reimburse the farmer for their property lost without having to figure out which dog had done what and go after that dog's owner. But if there were any extra monies in that pot left at the end of the year, it could go towards schools as well. So I would imagine that schools in districts with a lot of dogs might have fared a lot better than schools in districts with fewer dogs. So dogs, good for everyone. So that's that. And the next one is our Birmingham Schools Handbook, published in 1899. So we've got 1 year after those laws were published. And some of you might be familiar with different educational systems in different countries where students entering high school will go into different tracks or courses. You might go into a STEM track to go to medical school or something one day. You might do a liberal arts track. You might do a vocational track. Well, in 1899, at the Hill School, you could also do that as well. So when students came in, they were offered 5 different courses that they could choose from. And the handbook states that you don't have to decide right away, but the most important question you should ask yourself is, do you want to take Latin? If the answer is no, there's a couple tracks you can take. The answer is yes, you also have a couple tracks you can take. And the most interesting thing about this is if you were good enough in a couple of these courses, if you get high enough marks, you could enter the U of M automatically without having to take any extra classes or tests or anything like that. So imagine going to high school and not having to take the ACT or the SAT. That would rule. And that was something you could do as a high school student at this time. So the 5 courses of study were, if you weren't doing prep for the University of Michigan, you could take the German English track or just the English track. Now, if you wanted to go to university, you could choose the Latin English track, the scientific track, or just the Latin track. And if you're wondering, do I want to take Latin? The answer is probably not. Having been someone who studied a little bit of Latin and didn't major in it because it's pretty boring, I have to tell you, reading Caesar for 3 years straight, not fun, not fun. But at the end of your junior year, you can take a little bit of Cicero, and as a treat, you can have Virgil your senior year. So, if you really like Latin, also travel back in time, the late 1800s. And I have a couple other books here I'll show you just real quick. This is the catalog of the Birmingham Union School, later known as the Hill School, for 1890. Yeah, 1890, 1891. This is for 1888. I got a Manual of Public Schools, published by the Board of Education in Birmingham, Michigan, 1909, 1910. And the announcement for Birmingham schools, 1928, 1929, also published by the Board of Education. And the next one that we're going to spend some time in is the proposed new high school and auditorium in Birmingham, Michigan. So what was this proposed new high school and auditorium? It was Baldwin School. So this was published in 1916, 3 years after Martha Baldwin passes away and leaves provision in her will for a new high school. And this new high school was going to have an auditorium that could seat several thousand people, washrooms for both men and women, indoor running track. It was going to be top of the line. This is what her will dictated. But of course, you have to sell this to the taxpayers because they're going to be the ones footing the bill. So you really have to make the case for why you need this school. And so this kind of lays it out. And what's really interesting is the census data, especially if you're only familiar with Birmingham as it exists today as a pretty decent sized city. But at this time, Birmingham was still a village. We wouldn't become a city until 1933. So we're still here in 1916. And so at that time, Birmingham was only 4.5 miles north to south. And the present population was only 2,242 people, with an additional like 200 living in the outskirts and not in the village proper. And of these lots, the many lots in the village, they had 61 brick, 39 stone, and 518 frame dwellings. So that's how many houses they had. Not a lot. It was a pretty small place. And it also mentions that there's all these properties that are being developed for people to move in. And what is one thing that families are looking for when they're moving to a new place? Good schools. So you need to build this school. And it talks about how Barnum is at capacity, because at this time all we had was Hill School and Barnum. Barnum's at capacity. There's 5th grade students taking classes at Hill School because they're in the basement, because we had no other room. Hill School's at capacity. So we need a new school. We need it to be big because all these other cities around us are building new schools and they're finding out they're too small. So in a decade, from 1916 to 1929, we go from 2 buildings to 6. And another really interesting indicator of just how valuable the school district was becoming was how much the education cost. So since Birmingham School District was old and it was already established, when newer cities in the area got their start, they just sent their students to Birmingham. They didn't bother building a high school because that costs time and money and making state-of-the-art laboratories. That's expensive. So they just sent their students here. So in 1888 to 1890 school year, cost of an education in Birmingham, if you went to high school, it was $5 a term, 2 terms per year. The elementary and middle grades, $2 to $4. By 1929, for an elementary and middle school education, it was $100 to $160 per year, and $200 per year for high school. And at that time, the district was exploding. There were so many new buildings, hundreds of thousands of new students. And so that kind of leads us to where we are today. And so I just thought those were really interesting. A lot of times you don't find the little nitty-gritty details from that time period. So I found it fascinating. I thought other people out there might as well. And so thank you so much for joining us on our last live of the year. And once again, I'm going to give the number for Birmingham's COVID-19 hotline, just in case you missed our introduction. Birmingham has started its COVID-19 hotline again. Members of the museum staff will be going there. I'll be there tomorrow, so if you want to call and chat, let me know. So once again, that number is 248-530-1805. Thank you so much. We've really appreciated y'all tuning in for our lives. And let us know if you have any questions and be on the lookout for our new videos. Thanks so much.